You guys have absolutely blown me away. In the last video, I released some limited merch for the Nissan Gloria build. There was a limited amount of mineral wash shirts, like I'm wearing now, and some jars of metal from the Gloria build. And to my surprise, the jars sold out in like 2.5 hours and the shirts sold out in 24 hours. So thank you guys so much. I may not have the best of cars or the best of workshop or best of garage, but what I do know is that I've built the best of a community. So thank you guys so much. This would all not be possible without your support. And within those limited jars of Gloria build pieces, someone got the extra lock cylinder for the trunk badge. If you were the lucky one to receive that, please post it on your Instagram story or something so I can reshare it. And I don't think I've ever mentioned my Instagram before, but it's the same username as the YouTube channel. But let's jump into today's video. I'm gonna work on the 300zx and fix some major eyesores. At some point, I'd like to fix this issue that's going on. And we also recently installed the short shifter, and for some reason it seems like it has a lot of play again. So I'm gonna go under the car and see what's going on with that. But just as a brief recap, we left off with installing a Link ECU, which I still haven't mounted yet, and a Wiring Specialties engine harness. We also installed a radium fuel rail with ID 1050 injectors on an NA build, a little excessive, but it's ready for boost. But now that I've been driving the car for a couple days, it's way better than the factory ECU. We also recently had an issue with the village sending us a letter about cars looking abandoned or taken apart. It basically just seemed like someone either contacted the village or the village is coming after me. But either way, I have not heard back from the village ever since I called them, let them know cars are registered and insured. Got the house numbers up, although not when I'm filming. So luckily that is fine. I saw a lot of people commenting that I shouldn't have lived in an HOA. This is not an HOA community. That's straight from the village. But that's besides the point. Let's get some work done today. I have been looking at shops and houses to buy, but man, the market here is unmatched. I even went ahead and asked a realtor and a lender if I can get approved for a loan, but since I am considered a self-employed employee, I'm considered a high risk. So all the rates are extremely high. It's a little ridiculous, a lot harder for me to get a house than I think it should be. But until then, I'm just gonna have to work with what we got, right? We got the car up in the air. So you can see this new plate that I've installed here. And I wasn't sure if this can go on the top or the bottom, but factory goes on the top. But I've run into this issue where it looks like it's sitting on the trans tunnel and it makes this nasty vibration sound. So I think what I'm going to try and do is just move it to the bottom and see if that helps with the clearancing issue. Plus then that'll lower the shifter a bit more, which ultimately is what I wanted. It was sitting a little high. Let's see if I shake this, if I feel any play. Oh yeah, there is some play. It honestly feels like it's within this bolt right here. I wonder if it was coming loose. I guess to begin this, I'm going to start taking off these bolts. I have a feeling I'm going to need to take off everything on top. Well, it turns out I'm going to need to drop the trans to get to the other two bolts on that bracket. But before I do drop the trans, I want to show you guys how the shifter looks as is. So this is neutral, right? And then in gear, we'll just do third. Look at how much play it has. That's a lot more than it used to have. And you can see that it's happening right here on that linkage. Additionally, it is sitting directly on the trans tunnel. Not good. Got the jack on the trans. Slowly lower it down. It's probably good. All right, that would have been impossible to film, but I did get these last two nuts off. Let's try and get this bracket out and see if it does fit underneath. Otherwise, we did all this for nothing. Ah, I forgot that there's this reinforcement bridge that's on top. So there's no way that would be able to fit on the bottom. So we just did that for fun. But you know what, while that's off, maybe we can make some clearancing on this area. Maybe I can try and pry it up or hammer it up. That way it's not hitting this bracket. You can see the witness mark on it too. Oh wow, it looks like this one's even hitting. And just a tiny piece right there. So I got a channel locks here and I have wrapped a towel around it. That way when I am trying to grab this metal and fold it up a little bit, it's not scratching the metal. All right, I got the bracket bolts tightened back up. But I'm noticing there's another witness mark right around here. The corner of this bracket is actually contacting the chassis as well. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. Ideally, I'd probably grind this down just a little bit. That might have to be something I do when I pull this transmission. This was the real problem for today. So instead of just tightening this bolt, I'm going to take it off and put a little bit of Loctite inside of it. I just put the ratchet on there to check the tightness and check it out. It's just free spins. So that was already just loosening up on its own. Now ideally you'd probably want to use blue Loctite for this, but I'm going to use red. I got it pretty tight on there, but not cranked down, because if you do it too tight then your shifter won't move at all. So before I leave it like this, I'm gonna go test how it feels. It still has a little bit of play, but not nearly as much as it did. Goes pretty smooth. I might actually tighten this a little bit more. All right, I tightened it up a little bit more and it feels great. So I think we can start putting the trans back up. Looks like the linkage is no longer hitting in that original spot, but it is hitting in that corner that I mentioned. Maybe I'll try and wedge it with a flathead screwdriver. Yeah, that's gonna make no difference at all. The transmission's all back up and situated, and I don't think I'm gonna run that plate that goes on top here, this nice and crusty one, because it was definitely contacting that shifter. There's some witness marks in here too. Plus it's just gross, so yeah, that's not going back on. The only reason I did put it back on is because that's the only real shield from this whole area here from like exhaust fumes or, you know, just driving around. So in the meantime, I'm gonna have to think of something I can put here that'll block that out. We'll see eventually, I don't know. But for now, I'm just gonna put these rubber boots back on just so I don't lose them. They're not really gonna be doing much, but whatever. Put this thing back together and we'll go on a test drive to Andrews. We have some wheels and tires to mount. Damn, I actually got it straight for once.
What is up, Mr. Andrew? How many tires you got?
Just two. Some shiny Johnnies.
And then I also work my serving jobs.
No way.
Oh. So this is another customer car that you're gonna respray and refresh.
Just a quarter. Oh yeah, that's not a Bondo, dude. All of that has to come out. So.
Man, you're the one to do it. The master of refresh. It's got a whole bunch of kits in here. All right, I'm not sure if I've showed or talked about these wheels before, but these are actually different than the wheels that are on the 240. They may look the same because they are chrome 5 spokes, but there are some minor differences. The first one, and this is, honestly, I've never seen another wheel like this. There's 2 valve stems. Very strange. I asked Andrew about it and what he thought it was for, and he said he's seen it before on race spec wheels. So for example, when you're going into the pit stop or something, you need to check the air pressure, so you'll have a gauge on one and then you'll just air up the other side. So I guess that kind of makes sense, but other than that, I have no idea. The other thing that's different is there's only 5 holes in the center. These are the Urus NSO1s. They look honestly identical, but again, we have 1 valve stem and 10 holes in the center. These are considered speed holes, so they're not actually for a different lug pattern, they're just drilled straight through. And this is a Rota P45R, which looks more similar to the Urus NSO1 simply because of the 10 holes in the center, again, speed hole as well, and 1 valve stem. But the spokes are thicker, and they're about the same thickness as the BR wheels. Yes, these are BR. There's so much brake dust that caked up on here and flaked off all the chrome on the barrel. All it says is offset 25. There's some stampings in here as well. It does say 17x9. Yeah, so these are 17x9 plus 25. And the plan is to put these on the front of the Z. Oh man, that's gonna look so good. Whenever you have a car jacked up and you're switching wheels, it's always a good idea to verify there's no play in the suspension and then also do a spin test. Now I'm kind of hearing some weird noise going on when spinning it. And since the offset is different on these wheels, same tire size, same width, there is some contact going on because the offset is a little weaker, so it sits closer to the coilover. I can't tell if it's just the tape that's dragging on the tire or if there is a collar contacting it. But I do feel a significant amount of drag, so I'm going to take off this wheel and see if we can pull some camber on the knuckle. I can't tell if it was rubbing right here or not. Now that the coilover is loose from the knuckle, we can move it in and out. That's like a secondary camber adjustment. There is obviously the coil, but that's not going to play any role in this wheel fitment right now. This is one of the downsides to the McPherson suspension setup, because you can't really run weak wheels because you're going to have the inner barrel come in contact with the coilover. It was barely grazing, so I'm going to move it out like, honestly, like 2 or 3 millimeters. Yeah, see, that's a free spin. That definitely helped. Dang, this chrome plating is insane. I've never seen them so clean. I have to admit, the chrome plating on these BR wheels is way better than the Urus wheels. It's like an actual mirror. Wow. Now this side, we're gonna have to do a little bit of finessing with the fender. I'm gonna slowly try and work my way in with this tab that folded out because I don't wanna crease the exterior of the fender. Honestly, maybe I'll use channel locks to start it off. It is pretty unfolded. Oh yeah, there we go. We're gonna have to fold it in a little bit at a time because again, we don't wanna flex this too much and make it crease in the fender. Well, I tried. That's the best I could do. I already went ahead and readjusted the coilover, so this wheel fits perfectly. Now let's lower it down and see how they fit. I ended up swapping the wheels on Fran's 240 as well because, as you guys have previously seen, these R33 wheels have some very meaty tires on there and they were rubbing quite a bit on the fender. So I guess that's where those work wheels are gonna live for now. I'll hang these up. Well, surprisingly, the shifter doesn't seem to be hitting the trans tunnel anymore. You can definitely hear the exhaust leak more though. The next thing I want to do on the Z is finally fix probably the most complained about thing that you guys have mentioned. And just from me saying those words, I'm wondering what you guys think it might be. I know a lot of you guys are not too fond of the red bumper. Trust me, I'm not either, but we're just running with what we got for now. We'll paint the car eventually. But under the hood, there's one thing that sticks out like an eyesore. It is the shock towers. Now there is a reason I never painted or coated these shock towers, and that's because I knew I put them in the wrong spot. As the coilovers are installed right now, it is in the max negative position. And this is as much as we can pull out of it. And on top of that, this already has extended lower control arms. Not very ideal. Ideally, I'd like to move in these top plates at least 1.5 inches. And then I have Fran's 240 here that I'm gonna use as a reference to verify I put them in the correct spot this time. If you guys missed out on the video when I did install these onto the Z, I made a jig out of an S14 connecting the subframe, tension arms, and then obviously the shock tower. I don't know if maybe something was off or maybe the subframe is different on an S14, but it just obviously is not working how it should. So big shout out to Smokes for cutting me another set of top hats that we're gonna weld in. And then we also have some factory lower control arms that we can use to make sure that this fits correctly before I weld it in this time. And I chose to use Fran's car because hers still has a stock knuckle and all the stock arms. So this would be a perfect example to go off of because my 240 has aftermarket everything and drop knuckles. So may not be the best example, but we'll get it figured out. So I think step one is gonna be jacking up the cars, taking the wheels off and taking some measurements. I wanna see where the shock tower is now in comparison to how the S13 should be. And also, just as a reference, these wheels are the same exact spec as these wheels on the 240. So you can see how the fitment is on the 240. The top lip is flush with the fender. That's ideal. As for the Z, we have quite a bit of poke. These are also the same size tire. Same size wheel, same size tire, just has a lot more poke on the Z. With the front wheels off of each car, I want to take some base measurements. Basically, I want to make sure that the lower control arm bolt is in the same location for each subframe. We have already verified that these subframes are not the same, but this will help us know if this bolt is at least the same height or distance inward, because that is something I did not account for when I first did this job. All right, so for the 300ZX, I'm going to put the end of the measuring tape on the frame rail where the subframe mounts, just over 4¼ inches. As for the S13 frame rail, oh, this one's already shorter, I can tell. Look at that. Oh, wow. Maybe 3 inches down. All right, so that could have definitely been an issue when installing this the first time. Something I definitely did not account for, but I'm still curious how that would affect the overall position. I guess since I made a jig and just bolted it on, obviously it's not gonna fit the exact same because it's in a different location. The next dimension I want to verify is the bolt to the frame rail this way. This measurement is only important because I have verified that the width of the subframes are indeed the same. So for example, a Z32 subframe would bolt in, but only one of the bolts on each side would fit. And that's because the width between these two mounting bolts are different. You can see here on the Z32 how much wider they are. For the S13, I'm gonna call that 1¾ inches. Let's see the Z. This is the mounting point that we're trying to align it to. So midpoint, so from the lower control arm midpoint, we have about 1.5 inches. Wow, so those are different too. Another thing I wanted to verify before taking this all apart is the lock-to-lock clearance on the inside. So with this wheel still being on the car, if we go all the way to the left, all right, so that's locked. How close are we to hitting? Oh my gosh, we have miles. Looks like we have quite a bit of room to go to the frame rail too. All right, let's go the other way. Oh, we got miles of room in here too. We have easily over 3 inches in here. And as for these brake lines being in here, that is coming soon, don't worry. So at this point, I want to take apart the left front side of the Z. I'm going to put on the stock length lower control arm and then compare how that sits versus the S13. That way we can see how far in we need to move the coilover. Because as it sits now, I mean, this coilover looks like it's in a great spot, but that's only because I have that extended lower control arm. And we already know we don't have enough negative adjustment on the top. All right. I wonder how much that was extended. I want to say that's like an inch maybe? Yeah, just about an inch. All right, let's put this guy on. I've left all the bolts pretty loose, and that's just so this is an easier install. So now we have enough wiggle room to slide everything back into place. We'll tighten this lower ball joint first, and then work our way back to the tension arm, and then the lower control arm all the way. All the suspension is nice and tight. Now let's put the wheel straight to see how far off our toe is. Since we've drastically decreased the size of our lower control arm, I already know our toe is going to be really far off. All right, so that's straight. Oh my gosh, it looks like it's turning right. That's crazy. Then look at this side, straight. We'll deal with the inner tie rods later. For now, we have much more important things to figure out. All right, let's just pretend that this is straight because we're gonna judge everything based off of how the S chassis sits now. So now these have matching control arms. This is an S13 control arm, and this new control arm on the Z is also an S13 control arm. But fun fact, the Z32 lower control arm is the same length, just the ball joint is different. But since we're running S13 knuckles, we needed the S13 lower control arm. That's the only difference is the ball joint. I ended up taking off this inner tie rod. That way we can freely swing this hub assembly so we can see how our wheel is gonna sit. The next step I need to do, honestly, is take off this coilover and cut out this plate. These are the new plates that we have to work with, and like we said before, we want to move them in quite a bit. I'm thinking at least this far, but before I go ahead and weld this plate on there, I want to make sure that the wheel at least looks correct and specs out the same as S13. So let's just start grinding away. I do plan to cover up the entire engine bay and Fran's car with some moving blankets, and most importantly, flame-proof blankets. Fire blankets, as they call it. This makes it seem like I'm about to do surgery. Well, I guess I kind of am doing surgery. All right, I got the top plates prepped, got the old plate cut out, and this time I think I'm gonna mount it from the bottom. That way the coilover has an actual surface to mount to. So it's gonna look something like this. I've already made my alignment marks here, and I'm also gonna add some tilt inward because that's how it is on the S13 too. So I'm thinking about putting it right here. So I'm gonna tack it in place and then test fit everything and make sure it's good to go. With those two little tacks holding the plate into position, let's retest fit all this. Even though it is in the air, it's a lot harder to judge, but it looks like the wheel is actually sunk in now. Oh, I forgot. I took off the inner tie rod, so that's all that's grinding there. That scared me for a second. I also left the coilover at its max negative setting, so how do we feel about this? Oh, actually, that's not bad at all. Let's compare that to the 240. I think my 240 still has a little bit more. I don't know, maybe not, it's pretty close. Let's look at Fran's. Pretty close to Fran's, I guess. Sweet, glad we got that figured out. Now with this being so sunk in, that means I'm gonna need more aggressive offset front wheels. Now before we commit to this, let's verify lock to lock clearance. I don't think we're ever gonna run that much angle. We still clear in there, cool. It's actually bottoming out on the inner tie rod, and we still didn't hit anything on the inside here. Now, obviously, it's not compressed right now, so can't officially say that, but a general idea never hurts to get. Oh yeah, see, if that's hitting the tension arm first, we're good. So I've been thinking, how am I gonna match the other top hat to what I have over here? And this is what I came up with. And I hope this works, because if it does, this is genius. I just put this piece of cardboard under this side, since we've already determined this is okay. And I just outlined the holes in this piece of cardboard. And then I poked the holes through. And then, if you think about it, if you flip this piece of cardboard like this, now that will match up to this side. You can see our 2 holes here, 2 holes there, and now we know where our 3 holes need to go on this side. I also have some bolts. I'm gonna fish those through so it holds it in better. All right, so there you have it. It's on, and this is where we need our 3 holes. Let's slide our plate in. So there you go. That's where it's gotta be. I would tack this in place, but I forgot to prep this metal, so gotta take this all apart. But other than that, we are looking pretty good. We're almost there. Aha, it's tacked in place, ready to be welded. Man, that's coming out good. I'm gonna need to make some corners up here, but other than that, not too shabby. It's definitely gonna look a lot better than it did, that's for sure. All right, so this is what the shock towers look like now. Went ahead and did that side as well. And don't worry, this time I am gonna paint it. I'm gonna spray some weld through primer on it for now. I already did the bottom. We'll do the tops as well. Then I need to figure out the inner tie rod length, and then I think we're ready for a test drive. All right, I got the inner tie rods figured out. I ended up just using S14s, and they seem to line up very nicely. Now I'm running into my next issue here. I'm trying to lower the coilovers, and I haven't even had these for half a year, but they're so crusty that I'm fighting the threads here. You can see how much rust has built up on it. I almost feel like this wave spring that acts as like a lock washer prematurely makes these rot out. So I'm honestly gonna take it out. Just gonna pull it out and just not even worry about it, because it's hurting more than it's helping, let's be honest. But I want to lower this like an additional 1.5 inches, since now the shock tower is further inward, plus I welded that plate to the bottom, not the top like last time. But honestly, I used this cavity stuff and it got really deep in the threads here, and that's why I was able to break it loose, because before it was not budging. I was just trying to go left and right just to loosen it up, and finally it moved. So I'm going to clean out the threads and slam it. Quick fitment reveal. I did eyeball align it too, so hopefully it's straight enough. So last night it was a little too dark to be filming, so I finished everything up, wrapped the car up, got it all bolted in. I even took the time to do a quick eyeball alignment, so it actually drives completely straight. Both wheels are sunk in now, which is good. It's kind of weird to say that's good, because it's not usually ideal for fitment, but that means that the offset of the wheel is in the correct spot now. So before, the wheel was sticking out pretty far. I'll play that before clip as a comparison. So you can see now we have much more room for more aggressive wheels. And honestly, this fitment is so ugly, so I might even try and find a spacer to throw on there for now to help bump it out. But I'm very pleased with how this turned out. It's crazy that even just the front fitment changes the entire look of the car. I'm so used to seeing it like bulldogging, you know what I mean? Like the front offset was so high. And I think this fender got pulled quite a bit, because that looks like bacon. Is this supposed to be flat down? I don't know. What's the other side look like? No, it's flared out, I guess. I don't know. Definitely needs some work, but don't they all? That's the joys of building project cars. Thank God we finally replaced the horseshoes on our feet. These things are so ugly. And it's actually painted this time, although it is just primer, but it's not gonna rust away on this. Hopefully. Guys, that's gonna end today's video. Smokes is here, so we're gonna start the next one. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Don't forget to drop a like if you haven't already. Subscribe to see more. Peace. Drop the 4 2.